During my childhood, my family moved frequently, like a drop of water in a vast river, never staying in one place for long. We finally settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, remaining there until I left for college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are rooted in Rhode Island, but fragments of the various homes we lived in when I was younger still linger in my mind. Many of these memories are vague and trivial, chasing after another boy in a North Carolina backyard, attempting to build a raft in a creek behind a Pennsylvania apartment, and so on. However, there is one set of memories that remains crystal clear, as if they were formed yesterday. Sometimes, I wonder if these memories are just vivid dreams from a long illness I had one spring. But deep down, I know they are real. We were living in a house just outside New Vineyard, Maine, a small town with a population of 643. The house was large, especially for a family of 3. There were many rooms I never saw during the 5 months we lived there. It was a lot of space for just us, but it was the only house available within an hour's commute to my father's job. The day after my 5th birthday, which was celebrated only by my parents, I came down with a fever. The doctor diagnosed me with mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for at least 3 weeks. It was terrible timing to be bedridden since we were packing for a move to Pennsylvania. Most of my things were already boxed up, leaving my room bare. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, and these became my primary entertainment during those weeks. Boredom was always lurking, ready to worsen my misery. I don't exactly recall how I met Mr. Widemouth. It was about a week after my diagnosis. My first memory of the small creature is asking him his name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was large. Everything about him was large compared to his small body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears, but his mouth was the largest feature. "You look kind of like a Furby," I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth paused and looked puzzled. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he asked. I shrugged. "You know, the toy. The little robot with big ears. You can pet and feed them, almost like a real pet." "Oh," Mr. Widemouth resumed, flipping through my book. "You don't need one of those. They're not the same as having a real friend." I noticed that Mr. Widemouth always disappeared when my mother came to check on me. "I hide under your bed," he explained later. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play anymore." In those early days, we didn't do much. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books, fascinated by the stories and pictures. On the 3rd or 4th morning after meeting him, he greeted me with a large smile. "I have a new game we can play," he said. "We have to wait until after your mother checks on you because she can't see us play. It's a secret game." After my mother delivered more books and soda, Mr. Widemouth slipped out from under the bed and tugged my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I objected at first, as my parents had forbidden me from leaving my bed without permission, but Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question was empty, with no furniture or wallpaper, just a window opposite the doorway. Mr. Widemouth darted across the room and pushed the window open. He then beckoned me to look out. We were on the 2nd story of the house, which was on a hill. From this angle, the drop was much farther than 2 stories due to the incline. "I like to play pretend up here," Mr. Widemouth explained. "I pretend there's a big, soft trampoline below this window, and I jump. If you pretend hard enough, you bounce back up like a feather. I want you to try." As a feverish 5-year-old, I only had a hint of skepticism as I looked down. "It's a long drop," I said, "but that's part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was a short drop. You may as well bounce on a real trampoline." I toyed with the idea, imagining myself falling through the air and bouncing back up, but the realist in me prevailed. "Maybe some other time," I said. "I don't know if I have enough imagination. I could get hurt." Mr. Widemouth's face twisted into a snarl for a moment before turning to disappointment. "If you say so," he said. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, silent. The next morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived with a small box. "I want to teach you how to juggle," he said. "Here are some things you can use to practice." I looked inside the box. It was full of knives. "My parents will kill me," I shouted, horrified. "I'll be spanked and grounded for a year." Mr. Widemouth frowned. "It's fun to juggle with these. I want you to try." I pushed the box away. "I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe to throw in the air." Mr. Widemouth's frown deepened into a scowl. He took the box of knives and slid under my bed, staying there the rest of the day. I began to wonder how often he was under me. I started having trouble sleeping after that. Mr. Widemouth often woke me at night, saying he had put a real trampoline under the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep, but he persisted. Sometimes he stayed by my side until early morning, encouraging me to jump. He wasn't fun to play with anymore. One morning, my mother told me I had permission to walk around outside. She thought the fresh air would do me good after being confined to my room for so long. Excited, I put on my sneakers and went out to the back porch, eager for the sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was waiting. "I have something I want you to see," he said. I must have given him a weird look because he had it. "It's safe, I promise." I followed him to a deer trail in the woods behind the house. "This is an important path," he explained. "I've had many friends your age. When they're ready, I take them down this path to a special place. You aren't ready yet, but one day I hope to take you there." I returned to the house, wondering what kind of place lay beyond that trail. 2 weeks after I met Mr. Widemouth, the last of our things were packed into a moving truck. I would be sitting in the cab with my father for the long drive to Pennsylvania. I considered telling Mr. Widemouth that I was leaving, but even at 5, I suspected that his intentions were not in my best interests. So, I kept my departure a secret. My father and I were in the truck at 4 a.m. He hoped to reach Pennsylvania by lunchtime the next day, fueled by coffee and energy drinks. He seemed more like a man preparing for a marathon than a 2-day drive. "Early enough for you?" he asked. I nodded and rested my head against the window, hoping to sleep before sunrise. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder. "This is the last move, son, I promise. I know it's hard for you, especially with you being sick. Once Daddy gets promoted, we can settle down and you can make friends." I opened my eyes as we backed out of the driveway. I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He stood motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road. He gave a pitiful wave goodbye, a steak knife in hand. I didn't wave back. Years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The land where our house stood was empty except for the foundation. The house had burned down a few years after we left. Out of curiosity, I followed the deer trail Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out from behind a tree and scare the living daylights out of me, but I felt he was gone, somehow tied to the house that no longer existed. The trail ended at the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery. I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children.